a wonderful time.
Rosie Garland likes giving people a wonderful time. She works as an MC at burlesque nights.
You answer, yes, mistress!
Rosie attracts fans. Some wanted, some not. One became convinced that Rosie was in love with her.
She's the only person I have ever met who has scared me. And it's that idea of looking into somebody's eyes and there's nothing there.
June Gillard's lifestyle could not be more different, describing herself as Mrs. Ordinary with an ordinary family. She met a man who found her so extraordinary that he dogged her every step.
He's out there, and I didn't know what he was capable of then. I don't know what he's capable of now.
Both women found themselves hounded by people they barely knew, a so-called intimacy-seeking stalker.
Everybody, and welcome to Burlesque.
There's a lot to Rosie Garland. She's an MC at burlesque shows, appearing with an alter ego.
Because I am Rosie Lugosi, the radical, lesbian, separatist, feminist, bitch goddess, top femme, dominatrix, vampire queen from hell.
The last piece of makeup that I put on is my lipstick, and it's like, once I've got the lipstick on, that's Rosie Lugosi. Depending on how feisty I'm feeling, depending on how confident I'm feeling, I'll sometimes put on my eyes and then get on the bus if I'm just going into Manchester to do a gig. But I will never put my lipstick on until I'm in the venue and until I'm kind of ready to be Rosie Lugosi.
But Rosie Lugosi is not Rosie Garland. Rosie Garland is a poet who teaches workshops as well as touring with her own material.
I'm laughing sequins to light up the dance floor. Write your own horoscope. I guess there's kind of two very obvious halves to what I do. There's the kind of more page poetry and fiction side of what I do. I write short stories. I do that as Rosie Garland. And I've also got another side of my performance, which is kind of cabaret singing. And that's a character that I've created who's a vampire and who's called Rosie Lugosi. And the two are actually very dissimilar. Rosie Lugosi wears a big costume and sings really loudly, and Rosie Garland is much quieter and is me, really.
As a poet, Rosie is highly considered. So much so, she teaches.
I've been doing writing workshops for a number of years now as well. I'm a writing mentor.
And as a mentor, Rosie innocently praised the work of one of her students, a woman called Donnelly.
My first impressions of her when she came to the writing workshop, that she was gruff, seemed quite shy, didn't seem to like making eye contact very much, didn't dress flamboyantly, particularly the kind of person you'd see on a bus and not remember that you'd seen them.
But this gruff would-be poet was about to become a big part of Rosie's life. Donnelly began to consider Rosie her girlfriend.
She started basically turning up at all my poetry performances, and I started noticing her sitting in the middle, at the front, arms crossed, staring. It doesn't take too many times for somebody to be doing that for you to realise this person's always here.
Rosie confided in a friend, a fellow performer on the Manchester comedy club scene.
Rosie was doing a workshop for people using poetry as a kind of therapy, basically using self-expression as a therapy. As I understand it, the relationship starts because Honor attends one of these workshops and Rosie comments favourably on one of her poems, and that is the entire kernel of their long relationship thing, is one comment at a workshop. So it wasn't even that she did it on the basis of the performer, she did it on the basis of this workshop.
If Rosie's work life and lifestyle was slightly out of the ordinary, the lives of a couple living in Yorkshire, Alaric Gillard and his wife June, could not have been more ordinary. But life changed after June met the husband of a colleague.
I worked at a care home called Barleycourt Residential Home. The chap I only knew through the deputy manager when he used to pick her up from work. And I would offer him a tea or a coffee like I would if anybody came to visit a resident. I would ask him, and that is the only contact I ever had with a husband.
Those cups of tea, innocently made for the husband of her work colleague Anne, kick-started a bizarre and frightening few years, beginning with a phone call.
He wanted me and Alaric to go to Anne's birthday party. And we don't really do a lot of socialising like that, so at first we weren't keen. Alaric didn't want to go. And he kept on phoning and saying, oh please, she'd like you to be there, the rest of the girls are going to be there. When we got there we had a lovely meal, and then later on he came and asked me if I'd like to dance, and I said no, I don't dance. So he said, oh come on, you know, it's a slow one, it'll be okay. So we did, and I thought it was a bit strange. It was a bit of a smoochie. But he kept saying to me things like, is she looking over? Does she look mad? Does she look jealous? And I said, you know, no, I'm not even looking at her, you know, I don't know. So the dance finished, we went and had another drink, quite a few of us together. And I was on shift the following morning at 7:30. As I got into the car park, I noticed the car there, and as I got closer he wound the window down and he said, did you enjoy yourself last night? I said it was very nice, and he just handed me a note, and it said something on the lines of enjoyed the night, enjoyed the drink, enjoyed the dance, it's my birthday soon, would you like to come for a drink with me? And maybe a couple of hours later the phone went, did you read my note? Yes. What did you think about it? I said, think anything, you know, I'm not interested. I'm very happily married, you know, so are you. Just not interested, leave me alone.
Leyland would not take no for an answer. He pestered June daily, ringing her at work, suggesting meetings. June threatened him with exposing his behaviour to his wife. Still, he continued, with calls, before he changed his approach.
Then the letters and the notes started coming. They started coming in, I would say, a few days after the first note, which was after the dance. And then they started, you know, coming, they started bombarding with, you know, meet me here, meet me there, and all this sort of thing.
Leyland even used his family to deliver notes to June.
And on one particular occasion, I think it was his eldest son, actually brought an envelope. It was another note, I need to see you, and all this sort of thing, I love you, and all this silly carry on. And this had gone on for a few weeks. I didn't say anything to my husband or anybody, because I just automatically thought it will go away. And on one particular evening I got this absolutely huge bunch of flowers, huge. And I thought, how do I explain this away? Before that, I didn't really want to say anything because I didn't want to cause any problems here. I didn't want to cause her any problems. And I was just hoping that it would just stop and go away. But I had to explain it to him when I came home.
It took a while for me to take things in. I started getting angry and things like this, and eventually it dawned on me it was something serious happening. This chap was pursuing her and making her life a misery.
I think in the back of his mind, he never actually said 100%, but I think in the back of his mind he must have thought, oh, you know, there's something going on, you know, is she trying to tell me something?
I was suspicious, I was angry, I was thinking of how can I stop this, how can I get things back to normal and even keel. I thought about, you know, should I resort to violence? Should I confront this guy? Should I accost him or what? We were just generally upsetting and very, you know, a very bad time.
It was to get worse. Pornographic magazines and DVDs started arriving, addressed to Lucy Gillard, June and Alaric's 15-year-old daughter.
Lucy was a bit upset, but even more so when she started getting porn things. I'd find her in a bedroom with her arms wrapped around her knees, you know, crying. He'd sent some to me, but to me it's nothing, written them up, put them in the bin, but, you know, she was 15.
He sent pornography, like catalogues for like pornographic DVDs and things like that, to me personally. It was kind of confusing, but it also freaked me out because, like, what kind of person sends a 15-year-old pornography? So it was really weird.
Obviously she was upset, it upset me. I got angry at that. I could have quite easily, you know, ripped his throat out for that.
Ordinary June and Alaric and flamboyant Rosie Garland could not have been more different, and yet they were sharing the same experience. With little or no encouragement to begin any sort of relationship, two people, Honor Donnelly and David Leyland, had begun stalking them. Experts believe serious danger signals were being sent.
The type of stalker called the intimacy seeker is a slightly rarer form. Clearly there's a disturbed thinking, and a disturbed thinking is fundamental to the way that they think. They really do love this person who has probably never met them before in their lives and may have just shown them some kind of small courtesy, just been quite decent with them, and that has been seized upon as an intimate come-on, which they could not resist, and this person then becomes unique in their lives and absolutely someone they dedicate. They actually do feel that they love this person, the target.
From out of nowhere, two stalkers had invaded the lives of women who now feared for their safety, and their ordeal was just beginning.
I started to realise that I might be under physical threat.
I'd spend quite a few nights sat on the stairs, just waiting for a burning rag coming through the letterbox.
June Gillard had met the husband of a colleague for no more than a few minutes, and now he was hounding her with letters and calls, even sending pornography to her daughter, a schoolgirl. Rosie Garland had told a student at a poetry class that her work had merit, and now Honor Donnelly was haunting Rosie wherever she appeared as a professional performer. Stalkers escalate their behaviour, as their victims were about to discover. Rosie, the MC at burlesque shows, was tipped off that her stalker was digging for Rosie's contact details.
Friends at performances were telling me, do you know, that woman, she keeps coming up to me trying to find out about who you're going out with and what you do and wanting to get your email address, and they said, just to let you know. And then she started bringing bunches of flowers to performances and CDs and presents to performances, and I was having to say no to gifts. You know, again, the little warning bells were going like, no, you don't want to take presents off this person. And although it was hard to put my finger on why it would be wrong to take a gift or a bunch of flowers off this person, I kind of knew it was. And so it was kind of just building in a way that was difficult for me to say, no, 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 you know, call the cops.
Donnelly did manage to get Rosie's email address, and the outcome was deeply disturbing.
Then I was in a panto. I played the part of a wicked queen in a queer panto that was on in Manchester, and that's when the email started, and that was when I really knew things were wrong. Because of the content of the very first email left me in absolutely no doubt that this person was not somebody who I wanted anywhere near me.
Well, I read the emails, and I think that was, I really don't know how to describe them. The imagery within those incoherent missives, that was the closest I got, I suppose, to an insight into what was going on in her head.
There began a relentless email stalking campaign, with emails escalating in their level of violence and imagery.
There was stuff in that email that actually scared me and made me feel quite disgusted. The sexual fantasies that she went into were actually really horrible. And an example of that, which is I've always found when anybody has ever asked me, what made you realise that this person was a stalker? I just have to quote this one line from the first email, which is her fantasy about, quote, plugging the oozing vaginas of the deceased. What more do you need to say?
Within the communications and the behaviours of most individuals of this kind, there is this erotomanic overtone, whereby there's a lot of kind of fairly lurid content, either to the letters or the behaviours or the manner in which they conduct themselves, that they are actually not aware of. They're not aware they're giving the kind of game away of what they're actually thinking, erotic intent, and this can sometimes come as a shock to the individual who's receiving the communications, because at some point or other, and obviously in the case of Rosie, there is a line or a point where you realise that, oh gosh, this is not normal, this is not the kind of person that I could possibly ever treat as someone who I'm supposed to have a professional relationship with, or I'm supposed to sort of deal with on the social level. This is someone who's trying to get under the skin. This is not good, and at that point people panic.
Whilst Rosie faced an electronic barrage of unwanted mail, June Gillard faced a deluge of unwanted packages and deliveries increasingly bigger in scale.
First of all, it was tiny little brochures and things like that that would maybe normally come through anyone's letterbox advertising things. But it escalated to things like one particular Saturday at about 7 o'clock in the morning. There was a noise outside. We came down to find someone unloading concrete paving blocks, which the poor man had to put back on and take away. I think the next one was peat. We got big bales of peat, exercise equipment, cell temper mattresses, a topaz ring, people coming to the door to mend my Hoover washing machine, which I didn't have a Hoover washing machine. Come to mend a leak in the airing cupboard, and I don't have an airing cupboard. It was almost every single day that things came, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
There were mornings when I came down and the postman delivered so much junk mail. There were piles on the floor, deep, an ankle deep or more, in just junk mail that was coming through. Every single day things were happening. It was so persistent, every single day, every week, all throughout about 7 or 8 months, non-stop, every single day things were happening.
Whilst the delivery of building materials, catalogues and nuisance mail was galling enough for June and Alaric, June's stalker was about to escalate a sense of growing menace. His dispatches turned sinister.
The worst brochures were one for a fire alarm, which was followed by letters for personal insurance, death insurance, and 2 brochures on headstones. And I'd spend quite a few nights sat on the stairs just waiting for a burning rag coming through the letterbox. It was absolutely, I was terrified.
It's often a stalking ploy. It's actually often used by resentful stalkers, just basically to make sure you cannot possibly ignore them. They will deluge you with anything that can be delivered for free. Any service whereby people are able to sort of receive stuff can be abused by stalkers, and often is, and it can be abused to a vast extent. You can have an awful lot of stuff being delivered and pounded onto the doorstep. You may have hearses arriving, wreaths being delivered. You may have undertakers calling. You know, it can be quite scary, but it can also be quite simply annoying to have mounds of free stuff and junk mail being delivered every day.
June was becoming very frightened. The intimacy sought by Rosie Garland's stalker forced Rosie to make a decision. It was time to confront Donnelly.
It was really clear that this person was obsessed with me, sexually obsessed with me, and I thought, right, well, now I've got to tell her to stop. I've actually now got to approach her and say, stop. So I did.
And we finished the show, the first show, and kind of did this bizarre comedy ending, went upstairs to the bar, and this one was there. She was sat in a chair.
She turned up at another performance, and at the end of the performance I thought, well, I tipped the wink to a couple of friends. I said, just keep an eye on me, but I'm going to do this publicly, but I do it very calmly.
She looked really ordinary as well. She was a really sort of small, chubby, kind of ordinary, middle-aged, dull-looking woman. She didn't look like anything special.
So I went over to her at a table and I said, look, I don't know if you realise that your emails are actually very intrusive, and I don't like them, but they are, and I just need to tell you I'd like you to stop. Okay? And I just said it politely. If you put yourself in the position that you've kind of got a bit of a crush on somebody, and then that person you've got a crush on comes over to you and says, can you stop? It's never going to happen. I know that for myself, if I ever did that, I'd be mortified. I'd be so embarrassed. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Please, yeah, I get the message, I'll go. No.
The problem with direct contact and why it's avoided by intimacy seekers is they do live in a fantasy reality. Their relationship with the target is fantasy, and therefore they don't want to break that. So they tend not to endanger it. That's why most of the things they do are passive from a distance and don't involve actual confrontation, so that they avoid the situation where they're being told face to face, no, it's not real, this isn't the reality is you're going away, I don't want you here, etc. They tend to avoid that situation.
When I asked her to stop, she kind of looked down and kind of went, I don't know what you mean, kind of thing. It wouldn't make eye contact, kind of was gruff, and just went. And I thought, well, maybe that's her way of hearing, but it was proved wrong by the fact that within hours she'd sent me another email saying, well, you've said my emails are intrusive, you've asked me to go away, well, tough. I love you.
Both Rosie and June had suffered months at the hands of stalkers. Would it soon end? In fact, it would get much worse.
She was planning her life around following me around.
It totally tortured me, put me through hell, frightened me, could have ruined the family.
Stalkers who irrationally seek intimacy with their victims need little or no encouragement. Honor Donnelly had been told by her poetry mentor that her work had merit. Rosie Garland, an entertainer, had now suffered over a year of menacing emails and the reality of a stalker who attended her every performance. Donnelly trawled the internet to discover where her victim's next appearance would be, booking into bed and breakfasts hundreds of miles from where she lived to make sure she could sit in the front row of a comedy club or bar where Rosie was working. Despite being warned off by Rosie, Donnelly just kept turning up.
I walked out on stage and there she was, in my line of vision, halfway back, arms crossed, looking at me with that, I know I'm here, you know I'm here. I could just feel myself starting to shake. I actually started to tremble because this was the first time she'd followed me outside of Manchester, and I had this overwhelming realisation, she is never, ever going to stop. She is never going to go away. This is when she starts following me around the country.
But was Rosie asking for trouble by being so closely involved with entertainment that is so sexually charged? The burlesque scene exploits the risque. Rosie Lugosi, the character, encourages innuendo.
So if anybody would like some foul play later, come and see me in the interval, and we'll just see how foul it can get.
Rosie Lugosi is a very in-your-face character. She's very feisty. She does flirt with the audience, and I guess it took me a bit of a while to realise that, yeah, but it's my alter ego flirting with the audience, not me. This is an act. Even if it was a mistake and they became obsessed with me, I mean, that's something you can understand. It's like, it happens. But after I said thanks but no, very politely, and it still carried on, I thought, nah, this isn't right.
It isn't going to go away, and Rosie's attitude of I will forge on, not change my life, and hope that this person will give up, just would never work in the case of an intimacy seeker. They've invested their lives in this person. As far as Honor was concerned, Rosie was her life, and she would dedicate her life to her, and to whatever that took. And I think when Rosie realised just the extent of the entanglement and the persistence and the lengths that Honor would go to actually access her and maintain contact, I think at that point she probably did panic and realise she needed the law enforcement on her side.
I was nervous about going to the police, not because I thought I'd done anything wrong, because I clearly hadn't, but I felt nervous about approaching the police because everything in me said, they're going to say, you're making a fuss, but it's a woman. And also the slight feeling of like, well, but you are a poet. You're out there. You're a performer. And also you're a flamboyant performer. What did you expect dressed up like that? So I have to admit, those were my fears. But I was at the stage where I was starting to go out of my mind, but not out of the house. And I knew that I had to do something about that. And right from the very start, the police were fantastic. And I really want to say that that's when my life started to turn around, when I gave my first statement to the police, and this policeman listened to me and took it seriously and said, this is really serious and we want to do something about it. I can't even begin to describe, I was almost in tears. I can't begin to describe the sense of relief I had.
Rosie came across to me as being a very strong character, a very intelligent person, and extremely level-headed as well. But she was quite clearly concerned about where it all might end. And she was looking for help from us, I think, to give her the answers to those questions of where it would stop or how it could stop.
Matt Croft and the police had to make a judgment about Donnelly. Was she a harmless crank, or could her behaviour become even more worrying?
Honor Donnelly was quite a character, I thought, quite a bizarre individual. She didn't like me, I don't think. She wasn't particularly pro-police. She had a number of issues, I thought. I had no reason to disbelieve what Rosie was telling me, and of course we had corroborative evidence from other people that were present at these meetings when, you know, certain behaviours were displayed by Donnelly. The evidence was there. Of course, my job is to remain impartial as well and just gather the evidence, but it seemed that she was quite delusional about what she felt was reasonable.
Donnelly was warned off, told to leave Rosie alone. But if Rosie thought that would mean an end to her ordeal at the hands of her stalker, she was wrong. Donnelly had other ideas. Across the Pennines in Yorkshire, June Gillard was facing an escalation of her ordeal at the hands of a stalker. An innocent dance at a friend's birthday party had kick-started a bizarre trial of harassment. June decided to show evidence of her stalker's behaviour, countless letters and cards involving deeply disturbing content, to his wife.
I showed her one letter at a particular time and asked if it was his writing, and she just said, well, it might be. But when you've been married to someone for 20 or 30 years, you know how your husband writes. So I think she knew it was, but I think she just made herself believe it wasn't happening.
June decided to up the level of confrontation, demanding a showdown.
I just said to Anne one day, you know, how about I come home and we'll talk it out. So me and her actually walked home to her house. He was there. And she went upstairs for some reason. And I just said to him, look, you know, you've got to tell her what's going on. And he said, well, What do you want me to say? I said, I want you to tell her what's going on about you sending these things. And he just denied everything. I don't send you anything. I don't know what you're talking about and all that sort of thing. And she actually came downstairs and I told her what was sent and what have you. And nah, it's not my husband. He'd do all like that.
Slowly, bit by bit, not only is June becoming aware of the fact that the intentions of David are quite insidious and quite erotic and very directed towards her, she's also becoming aware of the fact that she's actually very much powerless to do very much about it.
Almost unbelievably, Leyland was to exhibit yet more strange behaviour.
She said at one point at work, I'm going to go away for 2 or 3 days. And that was the day when he was parked outside playing music. He waited until she went and he was playing it, which I thought was rather bizarre, because it was just one song over and over and over again.
This isn't kind of just a persistent form of stalking. This actually could be, reconceptualized, if you like, as being him imposing this fantasy relationship. We are no longer actually a person in a car furtively looking up at someone. We are actually in a film with the backdrop of the romantic music, which will permeate the kind of strange to David, reality that June is in, carrying out her normal activities and going home to see her husband.
It's a traumatic experience. It was abnormal, and as I say, he lived in a surreal kind of world. And he didn't know what was normal, which was abnormal.
Like Rosie Garland, June now knew she could not cope with her ordeal alone.
Eventually I said to my husband, I'm going to have to go and report it. So I went up to the local police station, had a word with them there, and they just told me to, have I kept things and to keep a few things, which I did.
Well, we informed the police eventually came, took statements, we showed them the evidence what we had.
The police immediately became concerned. Stalking has become one of the most common forms of so-called intimate violence, and the police are becoming more aware of how things can escalate.
Providing an effective police response to harassment is absolutely crucial. We don't know when somebody reports harassment to us whether we have a potential murder on our hands. At the very least, we have a very distressed victim who has felt that they needed to contact the police to address that issue. So we owe it not only to that victim but to the public at large to investigate effectively and to provide support for that victim and to manage any risks that come to light.
As police in West Yorkshire began investigating the case of June Stalker, police in Manchester were increasingly worried about Rosie Garland's stalker. Despite warnings from the police, Honor Donnelly had kept up her harassment. A series of court cases was to follow.
Rosie was quite clearly upset and frightened by it, and it was quite obvious that the behaviour displayed by Donnelly had escalated over time, and the emails were becoming more explicit, more intrusive, more offensive. The behaviour was becoming more aggressive, and Rosie was upset, very clearly upset by what was going on, and she was asking the question, how's it going to stop and where's it going to stop? So it was important to gather all that evidence as quickly as possible and in the right way so that we could secure a conviction ultimately.
I gave statements, she was given a warning, she ignored the warning by continuing to harass me by coming to gigs, and we got a court date for August 2004.
She was charged with an offence under Section 2 of the Harassment Act, which is stalking, if you like, as people generally know it, and bailed to attend court some days later to answer the charges. Some months later we had a trial where Donnelly was represented and Rosie and all the other witnesses were required to come to court and give their evidence. And at the end of that, she was found guilty.
The court case meant that Rosie now felt her life was back on track. although her ordeal had been made public.
The front page of the Manchester Evening News was just 4 words: lesbian stalks vampire poet. It's almost as if, you know, the 4 words that they really would love to get onto a headline were all there in one go. Lesbian stalks vampire poet. Brilliant. I mean, in a way, I can laugh about it now, and of course I've kept that front page because it's a souvenir of me getting my life back.
But Rosie Garland's ordeal still wasn't over. Her stalker had other plans.
Part of me thought, well, this is frankly ridiculous. This is almost laughable. And another part of me thought, oh God, it's not over.
We were constantly thinking, like, we don't know what he's capable of, we don't know what he's going to do next.
He said, well, he's quite willing to admit he did all these things if you admit to having sex with him at work.
The lives of 2 women who could not have been more different had been made miserable by the behaviour of 2 stalkers. The husband of a work colleague had bombarded June Gillard with unwanted mail and unsolicited advances, sending pornography to her daughter and bizarrely parking outside of her workplace and playing the same love songs continually for hours. The brochures he ordered and had sent to June became more threatening, so she turned to the police. Rosie Garland had literally shaken with fear on stage because a stalker had plagued her every step, littered her computer with obscene and menacing emails, and ignored repeated warnings from police to stop. A court issued a restraining order instructing Donnelly to stay away for 12 months. But far from ending the misery, Honor Donnelly was about to confront Rosie in a witness box.
It went quiet for a few months. It went quiet for quite a lot of months. And then I found out she was lodging an appeal. She wasn't appealing the sentence, which was to stay away from me. She was actually appealing that she should never have been accused of it anyway, because she said I was the one that was harassing her. So what she wanted was for it to, she said it was, what was it? It was damaging her human rights.
Rosie's view was that it was a backhand tactic to continue harassing, to continue harassing her, and I sort of felt the same, really. Not that we could do anything about that situation, because it is her right to appeal. It's anybody's right to appeal after conviction.
Part of me thought, well, this is frankly ridiculous. This is almost laughable. And another part of me thought, oh God, it's not over.
And the news was to get worse. Honor Donnelly had found another way to torment Rosie. In the courtroom itself.
Donnelly did sack her defence team. She conducted her own defence, which again was a bit bizarre, because then you've got the convicted person actually questioning the victim in the courtroom scenario. So that was quite unusual, but we did have special measures for Rosie, or what we call special measures, which are screens, in her case, to put up in the courtroom while giving her evidence. So at least there wasn't that face-to-face contact and eye contact between the two.
I was just thinking, what if this was a rape case and the rapist was allowed to be the counsel for the defence against the person they'd allegedly raped? And because it felt that that's what was going on, was that the person who'd committed the crime was allowed to question me about the crime.
For me, it turned into a bit of a farce. It was a bit ridiculous, the way she was strutting up and down. She'd clearly watched a film that had a trial in it and felt that that's the way it happened. And reality is a bit different to the movies.
Donnelly had miscalculated. Far from winning her appeal, she was to find a court which confirmed the verdict against her and then extended her sentence.
I think that sent out quite a strong message as well, that the courts take it seriously. The judge certainly took it seriously in that particular case. and it was a good clear message out there to people that that sort of behaviour, continued harassment, won't be tolerated.
To hear this judge say that he was taking it really, really seriously, and you know, he was bringing up things out the emails that I'd never even thought about, but that he'd spotted, that he regarded as threats and dangerous, and, you know, a sign of somebody who wasn't stable, and a sign, you know, a sign that this person was delusional and was a danger. Again, it felt like it's over.
In Yorkshire, having called in the police, June Gillard's stalker had been warned to stay away, but he didn't. Instead, he began a leaflet campaign.
One day when Lucy went out, there was posters strewn all down the road, on the lampposts, June, I love you, gorgeous psycho. So we went down, picked them all up, brought them in. And after we'd been to the police station, he must have found out some way, obviously. And there was a sign at the bottom of the road in blue paint, this way to the police station, have a nice day, up yours.
I was terrified because I was only 15 and it was affecting my mum so much, like making her really upset, and I was scared that he could actually hurt us, that he was going to do something like physically hurt us. It was terrifying.
The leaflet campaign was to be Leyland's biggest mistake. He'd left some in his car, along with other damning evidence.
On one particular Sunday, the police officer, Joe Edwards, who was absolutely brilliant, called down at his house and said, I would like to search your car.
Joe went with him to the car as he was under arrest, and stayed with him as he started then rummaging in the glove box of the car. As a result of that, when Joe got him back into the house and into custody, Joe searched the car very thoroughly and found leaflets that the stalker had been distributing about June that were of a defamatory nature.
In one of the side pockets was a lot of envelopes, and what he did on a computer, he would print out a piece of paper just with my name and address, please send information, or a brochure, and they were all ready just to post. So he seized those. He also seized his computer, on which he had other information, and he was arrested on that particular day.
So he was very thorough in not just interviewing this man, but actually searching his house, searching his home, and trying to pull those pieces together. And it was that evidence really that crucially linked a lot of the things that June was saying back to her stalker.
Again, the court case was to present a huge ordeal for the stalking victim.
I was terrified of going to court. Never been to court in my life. And I found it a little bit unnerving. Things were going along and the solicitor came down and he said to me, he's not saying he's guilty, but if you admit to something that happened at work, he'll say he was guilty. And I said, well, like what? And he said, well, he's quite willing to admit he did all these things if you admit to having sex with him at work. And no way. He said, well, I know how nervous you are in this court. If it happens to go to Crown Court, I know you'd feel worse. And I said, well, take me, I'm not committing perjury. Went back up, gave the decision, and he said, yeah, okay, I did it. And I'd admitted it. The judge gave him 3 months, which I think it is 6 weeks. So he got a 3-month sentence and I got a life sentence.
Rosie was determined to put the events of 3 years behind her. For her, the court case which led to an 18-month restraining order on Donnelly validated her decision to turn to the authorities for help.
The difference now is that I'm confident, I've been vindicated, I've been listened to by the police, I've been listened to by magistrates, I've been listened to by judges. I feel this is something that shouldn't have happened. She's been told, go away. And if it ever starts again, her or anybody else, I will go immediately to the police. I won't wait next time. I feel I've got my assertiveness back, I've got my life back. And, you know, of course it was me who did that, but without the police, I couldn't have done it.
Stalking scars in different ways. June Gillard believes she's paid a heavy penalty for being an innocent.
It's changed me. I'm a lot more subdued and I'm not bubbly and I don't have the same sort of personality. So no, 3 months wasn't it. It served 6 weeks. What's 6 weeks? You know, it totally tortured me, put me through hell, frightened me, could have ruined the family.